Something's wrong, but I don't know what. I don't even know how I know that there's something wrong. It's just a strange feeling that the world isn't quite like it should be. The world is a beach, with some terrace-like hills behind it. Waves wash silently against the sand. A cool breeze comes in from the sea. The air smells of salt. The trees, birches, with gray and white stems dotted with black patches, irritate me somehow. I look down and get a jolt. Where my hand should be, my arms end in square stumps. So go the first few lines of Cube World, written by Carl Olsberg. So, what do you think? Do you want to hear what happens next, or do you not really care? The answer to that is going to depend on how well his storytelling was able to grab your attention. And that's what we're here to talk about today, the importance of being a good storyteller. Hi there, welcome to Drick's room. My name is Drick. The art of good storytelling. Whether you're a high school student looking to apply to colleges soon, or an aspiring webcomic artist working on their first title, you clicked on this video because you want to become a better storyteller. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Right now, we're still just at level 1. Getting to the point of mastering storytelling is going to be at least level 3. So first, we gotta step back and ask ourselves why storytelling is even important in the first place. Let's start with a little bit of an exercise. Alright, so first, think back to a book you've read before or a movie you've watched recently. For the sake of example, let's just pretend you've read The Hunger Games. If you haven't read The Hunger Games before, just replace it with any other story that easily comes to mind. Now, try to remember as much as you can about the characters and the plot. What kinds of personality traits the characters had, any major events in the story, just whatever comes to mind. And hopefully, if you were paying attention while you were reading The Hunger Games, those kinds of details weren't all that hard to remember, even if it's been years since you read it. Now, if you're currently a student, think back to a paper you wrote in your history class last year. Maybe it was on the American Revolution, or the Renaissance, or the Meiji Restoration. Any topic works. Now, can you remember what was in your paper? Can you remember your introduction, your thesis, any of the body paragraphs, your conclusions? Probably not. Now, maybe you do happen to have really good memory and can remember those details about your paper, but I imagine that for the vast majority of us, we're just drawing a blank at this point. So, why is it that we have trouble remembering what was in our own history papers when we're the ones that wrote them, while at the same time, it's a lot easier for us to remember the details of a book we read a while ago, even though it was written by somebody else? If you're thinking it comes down to a difference in storytelling, you'd be right. And this is because stories are arguably the best way to pass along information, which is why we've been doing it since basically the beginning of time. For example, whenever parents want to teach their children important life lessons, they aren't just gonna flat out say it. Instead, they tell them stories that contain those same lessons because it's a much more effective way of ingraining those kinds of messages in their minds. Hansel and Gretel teaches us not to go into strangers' homes. The tortoise and the hare teaches us that it's better to be slow and careful than fast and reckless. The ugly duckling teaches us that we should accept ourselves for who we are. And so, through telling stories, people have been able to pass along messages like these forever. And this is due to the fact that stories are really good at making people feel a wide variety of emotions. If you've ever read Harry Potter, or even just watched the movies, there have got to have been times where you felt happy, sad, scared, angry, and everything else across the emotional spectrum. And this is because you were invested in the story being told, the characters, and the world around them. And On the other hand, it's a lot less likely that you've ever really felt strong emotion from an essay you've written, unless it's the sadness of having stayed up all night working on them. And this is because although your essays have important information in them, it's typically not conveyed in a way meant to get you invested in the ongoing narrative. Typical essays aren't meant to make you cry or laugh, and since they don't call upon your emotions like a good story can and does, they're just not as memorable. And so, for whatever it is you're writing, getting good at storytelling is really going to transform how your readers take in your writing. If you're able to tell a good story in your writing, you'll be more able to draw out emotions from your readers, which is going to make it easier for them to remember what exactly you've said. It doesn't really matter whether those feelings are necessarily positive or negative. The only thing you want to avoid is making your readers feel indifferent, because then there won't be any sort of emotional anchor for them to remember your words by. And the last thing any author wants is for their words to be forgotten. Now that we've talked a bit about why storytelling is important, why is it so hard to get right? I mean, humans have been doing it forever, and I'm sure you've consumed countless stories in the past. So, what's up? Why does your writing feel like a block of text, devoid of any and all emotion? The answer to that, at least in my experience, lies in the school system. For the most part, schools only really teach students how to write in one way, and unfortunately, that way happens to be the boring way. Rhetorical analyses of the books you've read in English, historical summaries of the causes and effects of human civilization. Every essay schools ask you to write is essentially the same. 5-paragraph essays, introduction paragraph and thesis, followed by 3 body paragraphs and finished off with a conclusion paragraph. Where is the spice? I think this is especially detrimental for high school students writing their college essays, or just creative writers in general. Very rarely are students taught to break the mold and experiment with their writing. So how are they supposed to write captivating narratives when all they've been taught to do is break down symbolism in Lord of the Flies and explain how a series of failed assassination attempts led to World War I? It's so hard to tell good stories now because they haven't had that much practice with it to begin with. So when students are trying to convince colleges to accept them, they don't know how to write compelling narratives for the most part, and are basically just thrown into the deep end of the pool without even learning how to swim first. Honestly, I think that lacking good storytelling in their essays is one of the biggest factors for why students who would otherwise be super qualified end up rejected from so many schools. Maybe they do have a good story to tell, but because they don't know how to tell good stories, their essays end up falling flat. Now, I won't claim that I'm a good storyteller or anything because I'm definitely not, but because I approached all of my writing with the mindset that I have to tell a captivating story to someone who doesn't even know me, that really helped frame my writing and give me clear goals to work toward. So instead of just saying that I enjoy learning foreign languages, I tell a story about using my foreign language skills to help someone in need and how that continues to push me. And instead of saying that studying abroad has helped me to become more open, I tell the story of how my Korean host brother helped slowly bring me out of my shell and how his words still resonate with me today. And through all this, I even purposefully developed this theme that storytelling is important. So if you haven't gotten the message already, you need to get good at storytelling if you want your writing to succeed. And missing out on storytelling is like missing half of the puzzle pieces. If your audience gets bored at any point, whether it's a college admissions officer, your classmates in English class, or your readers on Webtoon, then that's game over. It's especially strict for college admissions, where your stories are competing against those of tens of thousands of other students. So somehow, some way, you gotta keep them invested. So, how do we get better at storytelling? The best way, in my opinion, is to just go out and start consuming as many stories as you can. And I would recommend reading instead of listening or watching because you really want to focus on the words that are telling the story. This isn't a skill that you can learn from a book or some random video on YouTube, unfortunately. The only way to improve your ability to tell stories is to take a look at other stories that already exist. So read as much and as widely as possible. That means fiction, non-fiction, fantasy, sci-fi, autobiographical, works written by 19th century playwrights and 21st century fanfiction web novelists. It doesn't matter what you read so long as you are reading. And by reading a lot, you'll start to get a feel for how stories should flow, how to begin a story, how to end a story, and how to smoothly get from the beginning to the end, how to build up characters, how to show their goals and motivations, how to get them through the story being told, what words and phrases can bring readers to tears, which ones can get them to put down what they're reading and pace around the room as they slowly digest what they've just read. You'll slowly catch on to how stories tell you things without explicitly telling you them, showing you why and how things happen rather than simply saying that they happened. You're not gonna become a master storyteller overnight, but you will slowly get there so long as you keep reading. And like I mentioned earlier, storytelling is the most important thing to reaching your audience, but it's also something that is rarely ever taught in schools. That's why, for those of you who are applying to colleges, telling a good story is the most important thing you can do to increase your chances of being successful. You know, I'm sure that there were thousands of other applicants out there who did more impressive things than me, and honestly, I never really considered myself to be that outstanding of an applicant. But because I was able to write these compelling narratives, I found a lot of success in the overall college application process. And of course, the value of storytelling isn't only limited to college admissions. Elsewhere in school and also in the real world, there are going to be plenty of cases where good storytelling can make the difference between success and failure. I've always talked about how execution is more important than content, and this is where it comes down to. You can have a completely uneventful story, but if you can tell it in an interesting way, anything can become a good story. And so, whatever it is you end up writing about, just make sure to tell a good story. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Bye!
You